I wish that every young actor could have something like a Gladiator in their career. When I first saw it, I was blown away by it. And when I first saw it with a crowd, that's when it really freaked me out. Emperor, puts that knife under Maximus's arm towards the end. People were angry. They were standing in their seats and going, and I was like, whoa, this is big. Hello, I'm Russell Crowe, and this is the timeline of my career.
Now, where did you say that pain was? I thought you said it was over here.
Oh, yeah. There.
I think I was 12 when I did the Young Doctors. It was a school tour. At the end of the year, we were allowed to pick things that we wanted to do from a list, and one of the things was to go and visit a TV studio. So I go to the TV studio, and there was an actor there that I knew from when I was even younger. His name was Roy Harris Jones, and he said to me, "Are you here for a casting?" And I said, "No, I'm just with the school group." And he said, "Well, let them do that. Come on, I'll introduce you to the casting agent." And I ended up sitting with the casting agent and missed the whole tour, but I had a really nice conversation, and that ended up with me getting the job.
Russell, is your mother here with you?
No.
Where is she?
With my dad.
And where's your dad?
Where he is every night. In the pub.
As so often happens on those soap operas, they sort of shape it around your real life. And at that time, my dad was managing pubs. They'd been caterers for a while, but then they went into hotels. And so we would live in the hotel that my dad was running. So they made up this, story about the child, not having a lot of parental sort of guidance around because his family were always working and stuff like that, which was pretty much my story, It's funny to look back on it now. As I grew up and started moving into the industry, I didn't have the same fear that some other actors have about working on camera and stuff, because I popped that bubble when I was a little boy. A couple of years later, I did another little thing in TV, and a couple of years after that, another little thing, and touring in bands, and I was a nightclub DJ for a while. I started floating back into the acting thing through musical theatre, and so I didn't get my first audition for a lead role in a feature film until I was 25.
You want some advice, Miss Bracken?
It's Len.
Miss Bracken, don't ever try to fucking bribe me or threaten me, or I'll have you and Patchett and shit up to your ears.
By the time we get to LA Confidential, that's probably my 15th or 16th film. I received the script from Curtis Hanson, and it described Bud White as the biggest man in the Los Angeles Police Department, and I was like, Curtis, why did you send this to me? But I met with him, and, he told me that he'd seen all the stuff and that he really believed in what I did, and did a lot of Australian independent films, things like Romper Stomper and Proof, and a few American independent films as well, where I always insisted as part of the negotiation that my name was above the title. Everybody used to scratch their head about that, but it paid off later when, serious producers started looking at my work. There wasn't just, one role above the title, there was many. They kind of got more confident about being able to hire me, I suppose, in American films, because that looked legit, you know what I mean? When I flew to LA, I moved into this hotel and we began rehearsals. A few days into the rehearsal, the studio stopped paying the bill at the hotel, and they stopped paying for my rental car. The studio didn't want me to be in that role. They wanted, I think, Sean Penn and Robert De Niro in the film or something, things that they could quantify and understand. So there was probably a 4 or 5 day period there where I was leaving the hotel of a morning by going down the back stairs, because I knew the manager of the hotel was waiting for me in the foyer to ask when the bill was going to be paid. If I'd paused and said, "I'm not turning up to work," they just would have taken that opening to get me out of the movie. One of the producers of the film, who really, really believed in the film, against the wishes of, let's call him the studio for the film, he took a print by himself and he flew to the Cannes Film Festival. It was selected to be in main competition. Suddenly this film that everybody had already written off, now people started going, how is that possible? This film that we thought was one thing is regarded by the greatest film market and festival in the world as something else. It really changed the trajectory for the film, and if it had not been screened at Cannes in the way it was, I don't think it would have got the attention that it did.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North,
general of the Felix Legions. Father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Gladiator's my 20-something movie. I was confident about my abilities as a leading man. What I wasn't confident about with Gladiator was the world that was surrounding me. At the core of what we were doing was a great concept, but the script, it was rubbish, absolute rubbish. And it had all these sort of strange sequences. You know, one of them was about chariots, you know, and how famous gladiators, and this is all true, right, use certain types of chariots, and some famous gladiators had endorsement deals with products for olive oil and things like that. And that's all true, but it's just not going to ring right to a modern audience. They're going to go, what the fuck is all this? The energy around what we were doing was very fractured. You know, I did think a couple of times, maybe my best option is just to get on a plane and get out of here, you know? It was my continued conversations with Ridley that sort of gave me faith. He said it to me at one point in time, mate, we're not committing anything to camera that you don't believe in, 100%, you know? So when we actually started that film, we had 21 pages of script that we agreed on. You know, a script is usually between 103 or 4 or 110 pages, something like that. So we had a long way to go. And, you know, we basically used up those pages in the first section of the movie. So by the time we got to our second location, which was Morocco, we were sort of catching up.
Blessed Father, watch over my wife and son with a ready sword. Whisper to them I live only to hold them again.
You know, Ridley wanted to shoot me doing this after-battle prayer, and amongst the trinkets on the shelf that the art department had left there, they had these little figurines. So I picked up these figurines and like directed a prayer towards them as if they were my wife and child. That ends up becoming this huge story point. But it was like that was created on the night. And there was an actor in the room there playing the character of Cicero, a guy called Tommy Flanagan. He was booked as a day player for one day's work. And we shot that scene, and then Ridley was like, there's something about those figurines. We have to figure out that, you know, there's something about that, so we need to hang on to that actor. That led to Tommy Flanagan being flown to Malta for months. He was there for months. We still didn't know what we were going to do, but we knew we were going to come back to his character, you know? And then as it turned out, we came up with the idea of him not only coming to see Maximus, but bringing the figurines.
You would fight me?
Why not? Do you think I'm afraid?
I think you've been afraid all your life.
Joaquin was going through the same thing as I was. When you walk onto a set that big, it's very easy for imposter syndrome to sort of come over you. It's like, what am I going to do with this, you know? And he would go to his costume appointments and they'd put him in this armor and all this finery, you know. I remember one day he said to Ridley, I don't understand. You know, I'm a kid from Florida. What am I supposed to do with this? Go out and wave to people? And Ridley's like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. We all know this now. We know how fine an actor he is now. But back then, it was only Ridley Scott that knew how fine an actor he was. He was the one convincing Joaquin to do this and to do it the way he did it, you know? The subtleties and the menace and all of these things that he brought to that role. When I first saw it, I was blown away by it. And when I first saw it with a crowd, that's when it really freaked me out, because it was like going to a movie when I was a kid. People were so connected to the film and they were voicing that connection. The Emperor, you know, puts that knife under Maximus's arm towards the end. You know, people were angry. They were standing in their seats and going, calling him a motherfucker and all that. And I was like, whoa, this is big. You know, last time I saw Gladiator, I actually watched it in the Colosseum in Rome. And I actually got a little bit embarrassed that I'd received so much attention for that film. It's an incredible ensemble cast with beautiful performances from end to end, not only Joaquin, but Connie Nielsen, Richard Harris, Derek Jacobi, Tommaso Rana, you know, Jaimin Honsu. I mean, come on, man. It's just beautiful stuff. You know, I wish that every young actor could have something like a Gladiator in their career. We made that film in 1999, and I'll bet you money somewhere in the world tonight, that film is playing on primetime television. It has the longest legs, and people, you know, they're not just connect to it, but they love it with a passion.
I need a map.
when the script arrived, I was actually on tour with my band. I was in Texas. I was in Austin, Texas. But, I find it hard when my brain is doing something else. If I'm like on another film set or if I'm touring with a band like that or whatever, if I'm focused on another project, it's kind of like letting some of the details of another project into my head while I'm working is something I try and avoid doing, so I read between gigs. This particular copy of the script had come to me directly from Jeffrey Katzenberg, but he was very insistent, and so, I took it outside on that back porch, and as the sun was going down in Austin, and I started to read, and it blew me away. I think probably at that point, it elevated to the most perfect script I'd ever read, and it had this built-in trick, and it was such a good trick that it fooled the reader at the same time as it would fool the viewer. Because I read the script, I really got the book, the Sylvia Nasser book, on the same subject, and just took that in. And so when I sat in Los Angeles to meet with Ron Howard, I knew way more about the subject matter than he did. I was pretty rude to him in those conversations because I realized that, I would say, well, what about such and such in this year or whatever? He goes, I don't know about that. And I go, dude, what are you doing? You're supposed to be directing this. And he said to me something like, oh, Russell, I will assure you, I will know everything by the time we start shooting. Something like that. And I was like, that was a good line, bro. It was a very interesting process, but a very difficult process. When you bring in, on top of the other practical details about what you look like at a certain point, then there's also the thing of actually beginning to understand the tells of the diseases that we were dealing with. I think there's 20, 21, 22 physical tells, and they come on at different times. And so there was a map for that as well, which point in time there would be like physical tells or tells, that certain muscle spasmic things or something that would happen. It was very complicated.
The best way to ensure everybody's safety is for you to continue your work.
But I'll just quit.
You won't.
Why would I not?
Because I keep the Russians from knowing you work for us.
I was on the set and I was sitting there and I looked across and there was John Nash. And I had been asked by Ron Howard if I wanted to meet him. But on this film, I thought, it's just so far back in time and everything, and he'll be a very different man now that maybe I shouldn't meet him. But there he was. He was just standing there on the set. And so I just went up to him. I went, hi, John, I'm Russell. And he did this really funny double take. He goes, I just saw you on the television the other day. You didn't look anything like this. And I said, can I get you a coffee or a tea? And then he went into this dissertation about tea and the qualities between like southern Indian tea or northern Indian tea and how they suited his palate. And he was just jamming along about tea. And I was listening and I just said to myself, this is fantastic.
There are some northern Indian teas which are dense enough, and I enjoy the flavor that they have, and I have not been in this room for quite so many years. I wonder what tea they serve.
There's a scene that they call the Pens scene, right? Where he's offered a cup of tea, and all of the things that I do in that when I'm talking about tea are stolen from that first conversation. Even the thing of bending forward to sniff the tea before sipping it, and waiting until it had cooled down before drinking it. It's like all of those things I got from a real life conversation with John.
I didn't quit on you. I didn't quit tonight. I didn't always lose. I won't always lose again. I can still fight.
Go home.
I can still fight.
Go home to me and the kids, Jim.
Go home? Go home with what? Go home with what? A broken hand from Mount Vernon?
I actually read that script the year that LA Confidential came out. I just thought it was such an incredible story. I didn't know anything about this guy, and then I realized it was a true story, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the simplicity of it, but I fell in love with that journey too. This man had success and he'd done everything right. But then there was the Wall Street crash in '29. The way he came back from that situation. He was fighting on behalf of his kids and putting a roof over their heads and feeding them. So he was so noble. I just loved the guy. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to do a boxing movie, I mean, Ron's vibe was, look, man, I can see why you want to do it, but I don't see where there's any joy for me as a director. So many wonderful boxing films have been made over time. It's a pretty crowded ground. So I understood what Ron was talking about. I asked, look, I know you don't like the script the way it is, but if we were brought in Akiva, who had written A Beautiful Mind, he will understand what it's missing and he'll emphasize those nuances. So we did that, and that was when, after that, is when Rod agreed to direct it.
He's showing tremendous determination.
Opening of that film, I was 40 years old, but I weighed the same as when I did my first lead role in a feature film when I was 25 years old. So I'd managed to somehow reverse non-specific male weight gain and get back down to 81 kilos or some shit like that. That preparation for Cinderella Man was long and it was arduous. We started in November 2003 for a shoot that I believe started around about April 2004. A typical day of preparation on that would be getting up prior to the sun and going for a walk, just 3 or 4 kilometers. And then we would do a session in the gym and some yoga. Towards the end of the morning, you then get into the ring and you do all the sort of related boxing stuff. Then we'd have a break, have lunch. We'd do another boxing session, another weight session, and then we would eat dinner, and then after dinner we'd go for a walk and then go to bed, and then it would start again the next day. In the middle of that preparation, I actually subluxated my left shoulder and had to have an operation. They normally insist you do 7 weeks of rehab. I rehabbed in 21 days. On the 21st day, got into the ring and did 10 3-minute rounds. That shoulder still gives me problems. I've had to have another operation, and it's like just full of arthritis and everything now, because I didn't want everybody to lose their job. I didn't want the film to collapse. It was like, $80 million sword of Damocles hanging over my head, and I just had to make it work. I had to get back into it.
This is the newly formed Essex County Narcotics Squad. Our mandate is to make major arrests, no street guys. Heroin, cocaine, amphetamines, no grass under 1,000 pounds, no powder under 40 kilograms. Any less than that, then somebody else can waste their time.
American Gangster, it was a problematic project. They'd set it up and gone to make it with a different director and contracted Denzel, but the film, for whatever reason, had collapsed and didn't get made. So now it's this big black mark, but it was a black mark against Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, who are friends of mine, because we'd made A Beautiful Mind together. We've had that success together. We made Cinderella Man together. We've had that success together. And it was Brian, actually, that came to me and he said, do you see anything in this? Do you see any way we can get out of this hole that we're in, And because it was like, when I say hole, they were in a massive money hole. They'd spent 30 or 40 million or something with nothing to show for it. And I said to him, well, listen, man, I didn't even read the last draft I get sent because the title's stupid. I had a different name at one point. I think it was called True Blue or something like that, right? I know what it refers to, and I know that it actually refers to, it was the name of a particular heroine that Denzel Washington's character Frank was selling. And that's all well and good, but who knows that? Who knows, Brian said, well, we've done a little bit of a rewrite where we think we've divided the characters a bit more, but we've also changed the title. And he said American Gangster, and I said, I am very close to being in. That's a cool title, So then, I said to Brian, because he said he wanted to attract a filmmaker like Ridley to a piece like that, and I'd just worked with Ridley on A Good Year, so we were sort of in touch really regularly, And I said, I don't know, Brian, we can send that to him, but he's not even probably going to read it, I let Ridley know it was coming, and he had a read of it, and he just loved the time period, and he loved the fact that it was going to be set all in Manhattan and the boroughs of New York, and the storyline, And the thing is, the great benefit was Denzel was attached. Denzel and I were already friends. We did Virtuosity together, way back when we were, a lot younger. So I knew that would work. But, they'd paid him because of the failed production. Denzel had done the honorable thing and he hadn't scarpered.
You represent progress. The kind of progress that's going to see them lose a lot of money. With you out of the way, everything can return to normal.
Normal is seeing the police ride up to my house, dragging my little 12-year-old cousin out and tying him to a pole, shoving a shotgun in his mouth so hard they bust his teeth. Then they bust 2 shotgun shells in his head and knock his fucking head off. That's what normal is to me. I don't give a fuck about no police then. I don't give a fuck about no police now.
In that movie, by the time you get to this coffee cup scene with interrogation and Frank is still trying to intimidate, even though he's not in a very good position, smacking the coffee cup off the table and stuff, which is about a power shift between the two characters. And Denzel is such a fine actor that he recognized the opportunity and went with the power shift. I love working with Denzel. I love his company, and I love working with Ridley. So it was magnificent. But also around that, that was when I met the RZA, and Bobby Diggs remains one of my closest friends. Everybody that I worked with, Yul Vasquez and Johnny, the group of guys that were Richie Roberts detectives were very tight and all super professional and just fun to be around.
I hereby open this holy council over the God, where we have many serious matter to be talked about.
Such as, where are we going to hold this year's orgy?
It's trying to find some sort of truth to a very extreme character. You've got to be able to deadpan those moments in order for them to be funny. Taika and I, our families, the married part of my family, we come from what they call the same canoe. It's like Nati Perot, right? So he's, in fact, my cousin, in the broader Maori sense, He arrived, for an official meeting. Within the first couple of minutes, I knew that this official meeting required a gin and tonic or a tequila or something like that, because it was that kind of vibe. I fell in love with him as a bloke, So then he sort of said, listen, I've come up with this thing, and I don't know if you'll respond, but, when I'm thinking all the different roles you've done, what about a Greek god? They are asking me to play the role with the same voice as Maximus. His voice, I used to call Royal Shakespeare Company 2 pints after lunch. This faux upper class kind of voice, So I said to Taika, you cannot make me do this in an English accent. I want to do this as a Greek guy. And everybody just was like, what are you talking about, Zeus is a Greek god. He's no other god from any other civilization. He is a Greek god. They came back to me and they said, we'll only let you do that if you also agree to simultaneously shoot every scene in the accent that we think is going to work. It was fun and fine, but I doubled the length of every working day I had, because I had to shoot every scene as a Greek guy and then turn around and shoot every scene with an English accent as well. But the studio said at the time that they would cut both things together and they would screen both. The characterization that got the biggest response from the audience was the one they were going to go with. The Greek characterization absolutely smashed the English one. Just smashed it, by 10 or 15 points, And true to their word, they went with what they said.
We need your lightning bolt.
My lightning bolt is called Thunderbolt. So I think, to use somebody's secret weapon like this, that you should at least get the name right when you ask.
Can I borrow Thunderbolt?
Finding out that not only Chris is a wonderful guy, but he's a really good actor, man. He's got some comedy chops like crazy, his sense of timing and everything. So I really enjoyed it.
Father Gabriele Amorth. On the night of June 4th, you performed an exorcism.
That was not an exorcism.
What fascinated me was this guy in the middle of it, When I read the job description, Chief Exorcist of the Vatican, I absolutely, hand on my heart, thought somebody just made that up. Thinking, here's a snappy job title, Chief Exorcist for the Vatican. It's like, but then I looked it up and realized that's a real job. What's more, that the guy had been in the job for 36 years. So it was my fascination with him as a person that got me connected. And then the more I found out about him, the more fascinated I became. And having broken the ice with the Zeus thing and using the Greek accent, here they are asking me to play an Italian priest, Okay, so what do you think he sounds like? And the response initially was, we're thinking like just sort of a mid-Atlantic, non-specific American accent. And I'm like, you cannot get anyone more Italian than this guy. That doesn't interest me. I'm not going to do it that way. I'll do the role, but you got to let me be Italian. And you got to actually give me a few scenes where I speak in Italian language, and then we'll come up with an idea of how he transitions from Italian language to English. And they were brave enough to allow me to do it. And so far the response from people has been pretty good. So we'll see what happens. I never actually know the number of films that I've made, but it always surprises me that other people have made more than I have, because I feel like I've been working constantly. But I'm 58 now. All my wrinkles are earned. My grey hairs are all earned. And now I play characters with wrinkles and grey hair. The most amazing thing is for me that I still love my job. And I can genuinely say that, you know, and I know when I'm forced to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't bother me because I know why I'm there.